Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast. I'm your host, Nate Goss. Well, it's October, the weather's getting just a little chillier, and Halloween is right around the corner, which means it's time for our annual podcast episode dedicated to horror books. This year, 3 of our bookies, these are staff members who love to recommend books, did a Facebook Live event aptly titled Bookies Live, where they did some great book talks about some of the latest in horror that you've just got to check out. So for this episode, we bring to you a slightly edited, more concise presentation of that Bookies Live episode. Enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Bookies Live. This month, we have a horror takeover, some hauntingly good books for the month of October. My name's Lindsay. I'm one of the librarians here, and I'm here today because one of the genres that I like to read is horror. And I'll have Karen go next.
Hello, I'm Karen. I've been with Popular Services at Cook for 6 months now, and this is my second time on Bookies Live. Ooh. And I love scary. Scary is great for me. Anything scary makes me happy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark. I'm an adult services librarian here at the library. I also work with the high school students, and I select for the young adult area of the library, so all the teen books. I'm very excited to be here to talk about horror because it's also one of my favorite genres.
So I think for now, we'll go ahead and jump straight into the book blurbing. And I'm actually going to talk about this first book. So this is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. It came out, I believe, last month, so it's a new title. It's a very intricately plotted and at times kind of purposefully disorienting read, but it's a horror / thriller. So if you like your thrillers with a little aspect of horror in it, this would also be for you. It's hard to actually talk about this book because to know too much about it kind of spoils what's special about the book. So I'm going to share kind of what I can to try to entice you to read it. So we start with Dee, who is still looking for the person who kidnapped her younger sister 11 years ago. A clue leads her to Ted. He's about the same age as Dee. He was implicated in the disappearance at the time, but nothing ever came of that. So she moves in next door to Ted, who lives in a boarded up house next to the woods, perfectly creepy setting for a horror novel. Ted also lives in this house with a teenage girl who is no longer allowed to leave the house for multiple reasons, and a cat who consults the Bible for signs. If I give you any more than that about who populates the book, it will spoil things. I hope that's enough of a nugget. What starts out seeming kind of like your typical serial killer thriller turns into something else, and even that seems like you know what's going to happen. And then that changes again. It turns into something both darker and more special. Other horror writers have loved this book. There are blurbs from Stephen King, Joe Hill, Paul Tremblay. They all had well-deserved high praise for this. I would recommend this for people who don't like lots of gore in their horror. There's a couple of slightly disturbing scenes, but we're not talking lots of gore. And it's perfect for those who prefer kind of a creepy, menacing feeling while reading their horror. That's about all I can say about The Last House on Needless Street before just spoiling everything.
I just want to say that I'm reading that right now. I have like 20 pages left. And
you'll have to let me know what you think. Because awesome. I think you and I like different things in horror, but I think this one might be, you'll have to let me know.
But the book that I want to talk about is White Smoke by Tiffany Jackson. Tiffany Jackson is an accomplished young adult art author, and this book is also young adult. She's known for her mysteries like Monday's Not Coming and Grown. This is Jackson's first step into the horror genre, which made it a must-read for me because it isn't often that, well-established authors decide to change genres and dip their toes into the murky horror waters. Like Jackson's other work, this is a very engaging page turner, but it also still manages to illustrate tough issues that many teens in America face, like mental illness, victim blaming, drug addiction, racism, policing, the laws in America and how they're kind of skewed towards certain people. But the story starts out following our main character, Marigold, as she and her newly blended interracial family moved from California to the fictional city of Cedarville in the Midwest. She's in need of a change because she was just kicked out of her school for drug issues. To make things worse, her mother just married a new guy, and he brought a little girl to the family, blending their family, and her name's Piper. And to put it lightly, Piper doesn't fit in with the other siblings. Our setting of Cedarville is an impoverished urban city that clearly took inspiration from an area like Detroit or maybe Chicago. Areas of the city have had riots in the past, so they're completely burned out. The reason why they're moving to Cedarville is because Mary's mom just got a artist residency from the locally funded Sterling Foundation, which Sterling is a little bit of a hint, if you guys know that big name, Rod Sterling, of kind of where this book is going to take you. The residency comes with a free job, so a free artist job, and it also comes with a rent-free house in a newly renovated area of the city. What the foundation didn't tell the family is that the house is in one of those burnt out streets. So it is the only actual habitable house on the street. And it's also haunted. So in typical horror fashion, our characters start to experience strange things in the house. They start to see people at night. Things start to move, weird smells, weird sounds. And so it leads Mary, our main character, to start researching the area and the house and the history. I don't know if I want to give much more to this because, like the other book, there are twists. And if I start to give more, then it gives away important plot points of the book. But I really liked it because I feel like this novel plays with your expectations of a haunted house story. Horror often, or great horror, often acts as a lens to magnify issues that society is struggling with or trying to work through. And I feel like this book shines light on a lot of like the issues of gentrification, mass incarceration, structural racism, institutional racism. And I think it does a really good job of doing that in a creepy, scary way. So it doesn't just like preach at you. So yeah, I'd recommend it to adults who like YA.
You sold me on it. All right. So I believe Karen's talking about the next title.
I wish the cover of this book was as good as the actual book is. A blood-soaked bed, an exorcism kit, a knife with blood on it, nightmares, strange visions, and smells, just like in your book, Mark. I would say that The Burning Girls, it's full of secrets and never gets boring. It starts out with Reverend Jack and the 14-year-old daughter, Flo, who are getting transferred to Chapelcroft, which is a small village, because of something that the writer doesn't let us really know about until somewhere about halfway through the book. When they go to Chapelcroft, there's a lot of things happening there too. The reason that they're sent there is because the last reverend was found hanging in the church, hanging as in from a rope. And they have Sussex martyrs from 500 years ago that were burned alive because they refused to give up their faith. And two of those martyrs were girls, and that's where we get the title, The Burning Girls. There was also a disappearance of two teenagers that occurred 30 years prior to this incident. And I really loved the characters. So you might start reading this and say you don't want to read about a vicar, but the vicar is not stuffy, not judgmental, not super preachy. Just a really likable character. And the daughter, Flo, is very likable too. There were basically like 6 storylines that all intertwined. And I was just like, oh my goodness, what's happening now? And I'd have to go back sometimes and try to figure out things and try to figure out how maybe they intertwine. And there's a story of Vicar Jack trying to figure out what happened and what is happening now. The story of Flo, as Flo meets some of the teenagers in the area and starts exploring areas around Chapelcroft. There's a story of the suicide, which we find more and more information about, which makes it look kind of suspicious. There's the story of the burning girls, which maybe we're only getting part of the story at first. And then, of course, the story of the missing girls. And as if you can't get enough in it, there's a convict who's just been released from prison. So I really love the book. I had a hard time putting it down. It was a quick read and a very unexpected ending. So I recommend it to anyone who likes a lot of action, suspense, and a little bit of spooky.
Oh, that also sounded good. You guys are giving me more to put on my to-read list. Okay, so I'm going to talk about The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. This one just came out last week. It is kind of like The House on Needless Street. It is also very intricately plotted and compelling. It was actually so compelling that I read it in 2 sittings, which I have a young toddler at home, so that is actually a very difficult task. The second sitting was actually late at night after everybody else in my house was asleep. All the lights were off in my house. I was reading it on my phone, which was actually a mistake because that's when things got super creepy. Things in the book were coming out of the shadows. And so I was imagining things coming out of the shadows. So I don't recommend reading this late at night with all the lights off in your house, unless that's your thing. So this one, it has a very gothic feel. So there's a young woman in a creepy manor with a possibly untrustworthy husband. All of those are reminiscent of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, that kind of classic romantic gothic title. But this maybe starts out with a feel of a little bit of gothic romance, but it is squarely in the horror genre. So brief synopsis, Jane is a young woman. She's a very practical young woman. She approaches the town's young doctor, Dr. Lawrence, with kind of a strictly business proposal of marriage. Her guardians are going to be leaving town. She doesn't know kind of what's in her future. And she wants to stay and she wants to be of use. She figures the doctor could use some help with bookkeeping at his practice, as she's particularly good with numbers. That's her strength. And while Dr. Lawrence is initially reluctant, we don't know exactly why he's reluctant. He's the type of young man who could have married any person in the town. So if he hasn't done that yet, then there's clearly some reason he's not marrying. So he's initially reluctant, but then he eventually agrees with one stipulation. Jane must never spend the night with him at his family manor outside of town. He must spend every night at this family manor outside of town. As you can imagine, this situation forces Jane almost immediately to have to spend the night at the family manor. There's a downpour, big storm. She goes there, middle of the night, drenched in rain, and she stumbles upon a frightened Dr. Lawrence, and he is convinced that she is a ghost come to torment him. So from this point on, the book turns from kind of creepy, like what's with this creepy manor, what's with this doctor, to scary. Jane spends the night at this house. She becomes the mistress of this kind of crumbling and creepy estate. She has to contend with visitors from Dr. Lawrence's past who make Jane question what she thought she knew about him. She has to unearth exactly what happened at the manor, what Dr. Lawrence's role was in what happened at the manor. There is magic and potential horrors from practicing magic. There's lots of kind of pre-modern medicine, gory surgeries described throughout the story. And there are literal and figurative demons aplenty. This is for those who like real gothic horror, kind of that sense of place, that sense of dread and unease while you're trapped in this kind of confined place. Like I said, there are graphic descriptions of surgeries. So this book is definitely a bit gory. It is not for the squeamish. I don't want to give away too much more because I found a lot of the enjoyment was that dread and unease of not knowing what's next.
I just want everybody to know I have this book and I am going to start reading it tonight.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Is it good for like fans of Mexican Gothic?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Obvious read alike. Fans of Mexican Gothic.
Okay, so this is me again. My second suggestion is The Queen of the Cicadas by V. Castro. It's a vengeance horror story that's actually told in 2 timelines. So we start off the book with Belinda Alvarez, who's returning to her childhood home of Texas for a friend's wedding. And while she's there, she realizes that the historic kind of farmhouse bed and breakfast place that they're staying was actually the site of an urban legend that she and her friends had been told by family members as a kid. It's called The Tale of the Queen of the Cicadas. And the legend is the tragic story of Milagros, who's a young farm worker who came to Texas from Mexico in the 1950s. Unfortunately, she's unjustly and brutally murdered at the farm by local Texan women in what would be considered a hate crime fueled by jealousy. But the supernatural elements come into play when the Aztec goddess of death takes pity on the way that Milagros was horribly murdered and offers her a chance of vengeance and also a chance at new life. But what she has to do is become her servant. Milagros accepts to become her servant and then becomes this like demigod type thing, the Queen of the Cicadas. And she's very eager to curse the farm and get her just revenge. Back in the present, Belinda's struggling in her own life. She's divorced, she has a strained relationship with her son, and she's looking for something to give her life more purpose. She finds herself drawn to the Milagros story, and she starts to research the area and the story, and she starts to discover more clues and meet people who can help her on her journey. And as she explores the circumstances of Milagros' death, she starts to experience strange things and starts to experience maybe the power of the Queen of the Cicadas. I liked this one because it's joining the ever-growing body of diverse horror authors that are making it into the mainstream, like Stephen Graham Jones and Silvia Morano Garcia. I think this book fits really well in with those contemporaries. And I also liked that it kind of took like a Bloody Mary type urban legend. I don't know if our audience has grown up with the Bloody Mary legend, but it takes that sort of real life urban legend and views it through a lens of Aztec mythology and Latinx culture. So it was refreshing to kind of have a story told from that aspect. I don't know if I've really read anything like this before. It's one of my favorite books of the year as far as horror goes. My one criticism is that some of the love scenes got a little too spicy for me, but some people might not have that problem. I recommend this book to anyone who's a fan of bloody supernatural horror, if you like Stephen Graham Jones, and if you like social justice mixed in with your horror.
I was sold before, but now I'm extra sold on wanting to read this. All right, and our final title.
Okay, House at the Bottom of the Lake. What a weird concept, right? When I found out that this book was by Josh Malerman and that he was the author of The Bird Box, I was even more intrigued because I loved the movie of The Bird Box. I never actually read it. So I picked up this book and I found out that it was actually kind of a love story that was mixed in with a horror novel. And it starts out with Amelia and James, and they're 17 years old. They're very clean cut, very likable, and we find out a little later, virgins, both virgins. And they're going on their first date, and it's a canoe trip. And they start out in one lake, and they move into a less frequented lake, which is called a second lake. You can only get there from the first lake. And then they see a tunnel and they go through this tunnel and they barely make it through because they're just scraping through the tunnel. So it's very tight. And they find that there is a third lake. It's very isolated. It's unvisited. It has a funny smell to it. The water is murky and it's cold. and this dead fish floats up and its eyeball is like staring at them. And he describes it as not watched, but seen. So he does a really great job of creating that eeriness. And as they're going through this lake, they find this 2-story house at the bottom. The house seems totally perfect. It doesn't seem like it's deteriorated from the water. As they go back over and over again, because they become obsessed with this house, and they decide they're going to get scuba equipment so that they can actually go exploring more. It becomes this summer project. And as they get farther and farther into the house, things become creepier and creepier. So I won't tell the ending, but it's a very short book, a quick read. And I think that you would enjoy it, especially if you like the bird box.
I liked it too. And one thing that I'd add is that this might be a good entry into horror because it isn't quite as bloody or scary as some others. If you kind of want to take a little step into horror this October, this might be a good one to start with.
So that's it for the books that we have today. We're going to end with where you can find us if you want some more book recommendations. Karen, Mark, and I are all bookies. We give out book recommendations. We have a form on our website that you can fill out, kind of tell us what you like to read, what you've read before that you loved, what you don't like to read, what you're in the mood for next. And then we'll send you some recommendations. You can find that on our website at cooklib.org/bookies. You can also always stop by the reference desk at either of our locations at Cook Park in Libertyville or the Aspen Drive Library in Vernon Hills. We're more than happy to talk books with you and suggest some titles. So thank you so much for joining us. And we won't see you next month, but some of our other bookies will definitely be joining you next month with Bookies Live. Have a good day.
It's spooky October.
All right, a big thank you to the bookies, Lindsay, Mark, and Karen for some awesome recommendations. I will definitely be adding a few of those titles to my reading list, and I hope you do too. I wanted to remind everyone that Bookies Live is a monthly Facebook Live event. So if you want to catch the next one, make sure you follow the library on Facebook so you can find out when that Bookies event will be. It's a great opportunity to hear different bookies talk about the books that they love. And if you catch it live on Facebook, you can even comment in real time and maybe even offer a few of your own suggestions. But if you are interested in any of the books that were highlighted today, we will have links to each title in our catalog in the show notes of this episode, so make sure you take a look at those show notes and check out some of these books. While you're over on our catalog, make sure you visit our website, cooklib.org, and also take a look at our blog, Shelf Life. That's where we write even more book recommendations, along with local history stories, genealogy tips, and so much more. That blog can be found at shelflife.cooklib.org. If you ever have any questions, comments, or feedback for the podcast, you can talk to us anytime. Email us at webmaster@cooklib.org, or you can talk to us on Twitter @cooklibrary. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you share it with others and let them know they can catch this episode along with any past or future Cook Memorial Public Library podcast episodes in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they like to get their podcasts. And if you have a moment, please consider leaving us a kind rating on Apple Podcasts. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.